It's just one night with the man I've been dreaming about since our wedding day.
I'm 39. My wife Rachel is 36, married 9 years. I work as an independent compliance consultant, which means major firms hire me to quietly audit their deals for regulatory violations before they blow up publicly. It's invisible work by design. Half my projects don't even carry my name anymore. Rachel works in business development at a mid-tier consulting firm. She's always been the flashy one while I stay in the shadows doing the technical work that actually keeps companies from getting destroyed by federal regulators. Rachel has this particular way of dismissing what I do professionally. At dinner parties and networking events, she introduces me as my husband who does boring paperwork stuff, while she holds court talking about her high-profile clients and major networking successes. When her friends ask what I actually do for work, she calls my consulting projects cute with this patronizing smile. I never minded the dismissal because honestly, invisibility is a massive asset in my line of work. The less people notice me or remember my presence, the better I can observe what's really happening behind closed corporate doors. But Rachel consistently interpreted my quiet, methodical nature as fundamental weakness. She'd roll her eyes dramatically when I'd spend evenings reviewing complex contracts, make snide comments about my adorable little compliance projects, and generally treat me like her personal ghostwriter and editor. I spent years editing her business proposals, driving her to important conferences, and letting her take full credit for analytical frameworks I developed. I genuinely thought I was being supportive of her career ambitions. She interpreted my behavior as submissive doormat syndrome. That fundamental misperception became her absolutely fatal miscalculation 3 weeks ago on a Saturday night. I was sitting in our living room working on a detailed proposal that had taken me 3 solid weeks to perfect. A blind RFP situation where the potential client didn't even know my actual identity, which is exactly how I prefer operating. Rachel came strolling in around 11 p.m. humming some popular tune completely off-key, wearing one of those expensive silk robes she used to reserve exclusively for our wedding anniversaries, back when anniversaries actually meant something meaningful to her. The robe was sliding casually off her shoulder like some kind of conquest badge. She had wine in her hand, specifically my expensive Cabernet that I'd been deliberately saving for when I finally closed this potentially career-defining deal I'd been pursuing. She positioned herself directly behind my chair, swaying slightly with obvious self-satisfaction, clearly pleased with herself like some teenager who thinks they successfully snuck past curfew without parental detection. Then she delivered her bombshell in this casual, almost cheerful tone. Don't be overly dramatic about this, Marcus. It's just one night with the man I've been fantasizing about since our actual wedding day. The way she phrased it, absolutely no shame, zero hesitation, like she was providing me with a routine weather forecast about expected rainfall. And then she laughed, this sharp, high-pitched cackle she specifically reserves for moments when she wants everyone in the immediate vicinity to understand that she's completely in control of the situation. I didn't scream or throw anything breakable. I didn't stand up abruptly or demand explanations or ask any of the typical humiliating questions you hear in these domestic betrayal stories. I simply closed my laptop computer. The decisive click sound made her pause momentarily. She was clearly expecting some kind of emotional reaction. Maybe tears or a dramatically slammed door or broken dishes. Maybe she wanted me to beg or plead. Instead, I stood up with complete calm, walked past her into my private home office, and locked the door firmly behind me. Here's where this story becomes genuinely interesting, because Rachel had absolutely no idea what she'd just triggered with her casual confession. See, I maintain 2 separate laptop computers in my office setup. The first laptop was dedicated to the proposal I'd been developing. The second computer, carefully hidden behind a false panel in my filing cabinet, was reserved exclusively for what I privately call my war room operations. This secondary laptop contained no corporate logos, no identifying stickers, no saved browser tabs or personal bookmarks. Just a hardline VPN connection and a secure login prompt for my most sensitive government and corporate contract work. I powered up the classified system and accessed a clean white dashboard displaying black text and numbered security tabs. The interface showed Confidential Consultant Interface, Project Atlas 247, codename Meridian Acquisition. The estimated deal value displayed prominently, $4.2 billion. Under the section clearly marked Key Parties and Risk Factors, there he was listed in official documentation, Connor Hayes, Senior Vice President of Strategic Growth at Pinnacle Dynamics Corporation. Rachel's longtime fantasy. Her dream man from college years. Her confessed one-night companion. The situational irony was so absolutely perfect it transcended emotional pain and entered the realm of mathematical precision. I'd been professionally embedded within the Meridian acquisition deal for approximately 6 months as a specialized compliance and integrity auditor. My contracted work had been completely off the record and confidential, systematically reviewing executive communication trails, conducting thorough background security scans on key personnel, and identifying potential conflict of interest triggers that could catastrophically detonate during the due diligence process. I wasn't hired to build or celebrate this deal. I was specifically contracted to make absolutely certain it didn't explode and destroy everyone involved. What Rachel didn't know, and what Connor Hayes clearly didn't comprehend either, was that one of the specific audit triggers we'd methodically built into the comprehensive risk assessment model involved undisclosed personal entanglements between corporate leadership figures and external stakeholders who could influence decision-making processes. This trigger was buried deep within deliberately obscure legal language, the type most executives quickly skim past when they're hunting for their bonus clauses. But it existed precisely for this exact type of compromising situation. I clicked into a detailed flag dossier I'd been systematically building over the previous 2 months. The investigation had initially started as purely professional intuition. Connor's suspicious recurring travel pattern overlaps, highly unusual hotel booking stays, mysteriously inconsistent calendar entries scheduled around his briefings with senior legal counsel. Nothing definitively concrete at that earlier time, just concerning data points that didn't quite align with normal business practices. But now I possessed clear motive, documented proximity, and Rachel's smugly satisfied smile still echoing mockingly in my head. The comprehensive NDA I'd signed for this particular project wasn't standard corporate boilerplate language. It included highly specific enforcement clauses directly tied to mandatory ethical disclosure requirements, which meant that if any significant risk factors surfaced that clearly violated transparency and disclosure obligations, I possessed both the explicit legal right and the binding professional responsibility to escalate those findings through proper regulatory channels. And I knew exactly where those official channels led and who would receive my reports. I pulled up a carefully prepared draft email I'd created several weeks earlier as a standard precautionary measure. Subject: urgent, undisclosed risk factor regarding executive personnel conduct. The message body was completely clinical and professional. Absolutely no personal accusations, zero emotional language whatsoever. Just precise dates, detailed transaction logs, comprehensive hotel booking records, internal corporate email communications, and methodically cross-referenced travel activity data, all tied to one very specific, undisclosed companion relationship, my wife Rachel. But I deliberately didn't hit the send button yet. Rachel thought she'd casually walked into my life, detonated our marriage with a glass of wine and a throwaway confession, and that would represent the complete end of the matter. She thought I remained the same predictable man who held her purse during business conferences and edited her professional resumes while she openly flirted with other men during networking dinner events. She thought she still maintained complete control over quiet, reliable, predictable Marcus. But here's the fundamental truth Rachel never understood about men like me in my profession. We don't scream when we're systematically betrayed. We don't beg desperately or make dramatic threats or throw emotional tantrums. We wait patiently. We document everything with meticulous precision. We build absolutely airtight legal cases. And when the precisely correct moment arrives, we pull exactly one strategic pin and observe the entire room descend into complete, devastating silence. Outside my locked office door, I could clearly hear Rachel laughing again, probably watching some mindless garbage television show she only enjoyed when she was tipsy and feeling victorious about her conquests. She was probably texting Connor enthusiastically about how she'd finally told her pathetic, weak husband the brutal truth. I leaned back in my office chair, placed my hands behind my head, and allowed myself to smile genuinely for the first time in several hours. All right then, I thought to myself, with growing satisfaction. Let's see exactly how dramatic this situation really becomes. Sunday morning arrived with a deceptive normalcy, as if nothing catastrophic had occurred the previous night. That's what consistently amazes me about these profound betrayal situations. The way the natural world doesn't pause or acknowledge human relationship disasters. Birds still chirp their morning songs, coffee still brews automatically, and the woman who just systematically detonated your marriage still sleeps diagonally across your shared bed like she owns the entire mattress and bedroom. Rachel didn't even stir when I got up at exactly 6 a.m., not when I fed our dog his breakfast, not when I made pancakes from scratch and deliberately left her portion untouched on the stove to grow cold. She stirred only slightly when I retrieved the lawnmower from our garage storage, but that represented her total acknowledgement. Just a lazy stretch and a muttered yawn. Absolutely nothing resembling guilt or second thoughts about her confession. She clearly didn't expect any meaningful consequences. That much was crystal clear from her behavior patterns. To Rachel's perspective, this represented finished business. She'd successfully dropped her personal truth bomb, smiled triumphantly through her victory lap, consumed my expensive wine, and confidently assumed that Marcus, good old reliable doormat Marcus, would bury this devastating revelation exactly like I'd buried every other humiliation and dismissal over the years. The sarcastic comments about my professional work, the dramatic eye rolls during dinner party conversations, the way she'd describe my consulting projects as adorable whenever her friends asked what I actually accomplished for a living. It was all simply part of our well-established routine, and she fully expected that routine to continue exactly as it had before. I mowed our entire lawn with deliberate mathematical precision, the type of systematic approach I specifically reserve for days when I need to think through highly complex problems requiring careful analysis. The grass didn't actually need cutting. I'd performed this exact maintenance just the previous weekend. But there was something therapeutically valuable about the mechanical sound and the perfectly straight, parallel lines that helped me sort the chaotic rage in my head into organized, actionable rows of strategic planning. I checked our mailbox thoroughly, drove to the local hardware store to purchase screws I didn't actually need, stopped at the grocery store to buy items we already had in adequate supply. Anything to maintain constant movement, anything to prevent the building fury from escalating into something messy and loud and unprofessional. Because I absolutely didn't need loud emotional outbursts or dramatic confrontations. What I specifically needed was cold, calculated leverage applied with surgical precision. When I returned home with my unnecessary purchases, Rachel remained in our bed with the television playing some mindless program. I could hear canned laughter spilling down the stairs as I methodically unpacked grocery bags in our kitchen. She didn't call out to apologize or express any second thoughts about her revelation. She simply existed within this delusional protective bubble where everything would automatically smooth over exactly like it always had before. Her behavior didn't surprise me whatsoever. Rachel had never genuinely believed I possessed any real teeth or capacity for retaliation. By dinner time, she was padding around our kitchen barefoot wearing comfortable pajamas, casually sipping water and asking whether I preferred Thai food or Italian takeout for our evening meal, as if she hadn't confessed to systematic infidelity less than 24 hours earlier, as if she hadn't told me she'd been fantasizing about another man throughout our entire marriage. I informed her I wasn't hungry. She ordered Thai food anyway, red curry with mild spice level and extra rice, my exact usual order that she'd memorized over years. The sheer audacity was almost beautiful in its complete tone deafness to the situation. Around 8 p.m., I went into my home study and deliberately left the door wide open this time. I intentionally let Rachel hear steady keyboard clicking and the sound of papers rustling, allowing her to assume I'd returned to my normal routine of boring compliance work. Predictable Marcus, reliable Marcus, the man who never makes waves or causes interpersonal problems. At exactly 9:30 p.m., I stepped away from my desk and left my laptop computer open and easily accessible, not in an obvious or suspicious manner, just naturally accessible for anyone walking past the doorway. My email inbox glowed softly in the focused desk lamp light, and positioned right at the top of my message list was that single, carefully crafted draft I'd been developing. Urgent, undisclosed risk factor regarding executive personnel conduct. Rachel walked past my study doorway once, then twice. The third time, she deliberately slowed her walking pace. I didn't turn around or acknowledge her presence in any way. I simply continued flipping through a printed financial spreadsheet with a red pen in my hand, acting completely absorbed in mundane numerical data analysis. But I could physically sense her reading that email subject line over my shoulder. Her breathing pattern caught almost imperceptibly when she processed what she was seeing. Then she padded off toward the staircase without saying a single word. The draft email remained unopened and unread, exactly as I'd strategically planned. She didn't ask me about its contents, didn't confront me directly about its implications, but the entire atmospheric pressure within our house changed dramatically. Rachel's bulletproof confidence from the previous night was beginning to develop visible structural cracks. She had no idea what information that mysterious email contained, didn't know whether it concerned her or Connor or both of them together, but she absolutely understood it wasn't nothing. And creating that specific psychological uncertainty represented precisely the intended effect. Upstairs, the television volume increased noticeably, clearly overcompensating and attempting to drown out whatever anxious thoughts were beginning to spiral chaotically in her mind. I could hear her pacing back and forth across our hardwood bedroom floors, occasional creaks near the walk-in closet area. She was beginning to unravel psychologically, just enough to matter significantly, but not enough to take any direct confrontational action. The pressure application was absolutely perfect. I finally left my study around 10:30 p.m., casually carrying my laptop like any other routine evening. Rachel was curled up on our living room couch with her smartphone in her lap, pretending to scroll through social media feeds. She looked up and offered me this hesitant, uncertain smile, like she wasn't entirely sure which version of Marcus would emerge from this particular interaction. I simply nodded politely and walked past her toward the kitchen to pour myself a drink. "I'm thinking about flying out to Dallas next week," I mentioned casually while swirling whiskey in my glass. "Potential new project might be developing there." Her eyes flicked up immediately. There was a small, nervous twitch in the corner of her mouth. "Dallas? For what kind of client?" she asked with forced casualness. "Still in preliminary discussions," I replied, taking a measured sip. "You wouldn't know the company involved." I could practically observe the mental calculations happening behind her eyes. The desperate guesswork, the paranoid possibilities, the growing fear of unknown consequences. She wanted to ask more probing questions, but something instinctive held her back from pushing too hard. Instead, she just nodded and mumbled something about needing to call her mother the following day. We both spent the remainder of the evening pretending the psychological tension wasn't there, but it sat between us humming dangerously like an exposed electrical wire. Rachel went to bed unusually early and left multiple lights on in the upstairs hallway, something she used to do during childhood when she was nervous about thunderstorms. But this wasn't natural weather. This was a carefully constructed warning system, and the countdown had officially begun. Monday morning at precisely 8 a.m., Connor Hayes stepped confidently out of his black luxury town car, wearing an impeccably tailored navy blue suit that probably cost more than most people earn in monthly salary. He represented exactly the type of man who didn't bother checking mirrors because he expected his reflection to automatically adjust and accommodate his presence. The building's professional concierge greeted Connor by name before he'd taken 3 steps through the entrance. His morning espresso was already prepared and waiting in an expensive ceramic to-go cup, and by the time he reached the executive elevator bank, his premium smartwatch was quietly buzzing with the day's carefully orchestrated agenda. Pre-merger briefings with the acquisition coordination team, PR strategy alignment meetings, and a comprehensive final legal walkthrough before the Meridian deal would be officially announced to the financial press and investment community. Connor was riding an absolute professional high. After years of strategic positioning, careful networking, and systematically sleeping his way upward through various beneficial relationships, he was finally walking into the corporate boardroom as the man everyone would remember when this acquisition made national headlines. He had elaborate celebration plans, champagne lunch with the senior executive partners, an expensive dinner reservation booked under a fake name for his victory celebration with Rachel, and probably a romantic weekend getaway to mark his professional coronation. "This merger represents my defining moment," he'd texted Rachel just 2 days earlier, in a message I'd intercepted through routine metadata analysis protocols. "After this deal closes successfully, everything changes permanently for both of us." He should have exercised considerably more caution when selecting his throne. As the elevator doors slid open smoothly onto the 32nd floor, Connor's executive assistant Claire was already positioned and waiting for his arrival. Except this particular morning, she wasn't displaying her usual professional smile and cheerful demeanor. She was holding his company-issued phone in one hand and her personal device in the other, both screens glowing ominously with multiple unread notification alerts. "Sir?" Claire started, her voice cracking noticeably in a way that immediately short-circuited Connor's confident mood. "We have a very significant problem that requires immediate attention." Connor still wasn't genuinely concerned or worried. Not yet, anyway. He operated under the fundamental belief that problems existed primarily to validate his superior problem-solving abilities and executive decision-making skills. He reached for the work phone with casual confidence, expecting to find a routine vendor delay or perhaps a minor logistics hiccup that would require 5 minutes of his brilliant attention to resolve completely. Instead, what stared back at him was an internal security alert flagged with a bright red warning banner across the top. Confidential. Priority 1 disclosure escalation. Immediate executive review required. He opened the attached document and discovered a detailed PDF report submitted by a masked whistleblower through an anonymous compliance portal system used exclusively by third-party federal regulators during high-stakes corporate acquisitions. The first page was devastatingly blunt and direct. Undisclosed romantic relationship between executive-level officer and external stakeholder tied to internal RFP documentation processes. Possible breach of SEC-mandated transparency requirements. Potential manipulation of conflict of interest declarations. The second page contained comprehensive hotel booking records. Every single stay Connor had arranged under his company's executive expense account system, meticulously cross-referenced against Rachel's frequent flyer identification number and travel reward accounts. The timestamps were absolutely damning and irrefutable. Key cities included San Diego, Chicago, and Charleston. Not a single legitimate business meeting had been scheduled or documented during any of these travel dates. The third page displayed detailed cell phone communication logs extracted through a professional data scrubbing API and carefully correlated against internal compliance metadata systems. Dozens of late-night phone calls, weekend text message exchanges, all completely unreported under mandatory company disclosure policies and federal transparency requirements. And finally, the devastating conclusion: a comprehensive spreadsheet outlining specific sections of SEC disclosure regulations requiring complete transparency regarding any personal relationships that could potentially influence corporate decision-making processes, particularly concerning future acquisitions or shifts in corporate equity structures. Connor's hands started trembling noticeably for the first time that morning. He closed the damaging report and turned toward the floor-to-ceiling glass wall at the end of the hallway, staring at his own reflection, which appeared considerably paler than he remembered from his confident morning routine. "What else is there?" he asked Claire, his voice dropping to nearly a whisper. She hesitated for several uncomfortable seconds before responding. "The acquiring firm's CEO received a second email early this morning. It wasn't routed through our internal communication systems. It went directly to his personal email account." Connor felt his arterial pressure plummet dramatically. "How do you know that information?" Claire didn't answer with words. Instead, she turned her personal phone toward him, displaying a screenshot forwarded by a friend who worked at the other company. The email subject line read, "Supplemental Risk Disclosure Documentation, Executive Entanglement Meridian Merger," and had been sent from a completely untraceable Proton email address with thoroughly anonymized metadata. Connor turned on his heel and stormed into the nearest empty conference room, slamming the door behind him hard enough that people throughout the entire floor could hear the impact. He started pacing frantically back and forth and pulled out his personal phone, dialing Rachel's number once, then twice, then a third desperate time. Every single call went straight to voicemail without even ringing. Rachel wasn't answering because she didn't know yet. She had absolutely no idea that her quiet husband had just systematically destroyed both of their careers with the precision of a perfectly executed surgical strike. Down the hallway, the main executive boardroom was already filling up with corporate partners, experienced lawyers, and senior executives, all buzzing excitedly about projected financial numbers, post-merger integration strategies, and anticipated stock price increases. Connor leaned against the doorframe of his temporary refuge, suddenly completely unsure whether he should even attempt to walk into that critical meeting. The confident voice in his head that used to whisper seductive strategies and brilliant manipulations was now screaming something he'd never heard before. "You're not in control of this situation anymore." He opened his laptop and attempted to log into the secure data room where all the merger documentation was stored. Access delayed. System probably flagged. Account probably locked pending comprehensive internal review. In the span of a single hour, all the corporate language surrounding him had shifted dramatically from success and rollout to audit hold and escalation protocol. Claire appeared in the doorway again, her facial expression considerably tighter than before. Legal department wants to know immediately if you've disclosed any personal conflicts of interest that might affect your decision-making capabilities on this acquisition. Connor didn't answer immediately, because suddenly providing the honest answer carried potentially serious criminal implications. The professional empire he'd built on charm, strategic shortcuts, and additional charm was developing severe structural cracks, not because of a simple mistake or oversight, but because someone had been watching quietly and carefully for months, waiting patiently for exactly this moment, not to destroy him out of personal spite, but to reveal him with methodical, surgical precision. And now that comprehensive revelation was systematically beginning. By Monday afternoon at exactly 2:16 p.m., two separate legal teams, one stationed in San Francisco, the other in New York, had made the unprecedented decision to completely pause the entire due diligence pipeline. Not slow it down or request additional documentation, but totally pause all operations. Every open document was red-stamped with review hold. Access credentials were frozen across all computer systems, joint briefings were immediately suspended, and the virtual data room was shut down entirely with a notice reading, "Access suspended pending ethical compliance review." At Pinnacle Dynamics headquarters, Senior Legal Officer Margaret Torres stood in front of the glass-walled boardroom holding a printed version of the whistleblower document, like it contained highly radioactive material. Her facial expression hadn't changed since the report first appeared in her email inbox 3 hours earlier. She held the damaging pages in one hand while nervously tapping a pen against her other palm, reading selected excerpts aloud to the 12 stunned executives seated around the polished mahogany conference table. Failure to disclose internal conflicts of interest tied to romantic entanglements may trigger immediate ethical review procedures and potentially invalidate merger terms under Clause 7C of the Joint Integrity Framework Agreement, she read in a deliberately monotone voice. Complete dead silence filled the expensive room. Someone coughed nervously. Someone else muttered under their breath, "We should have anticipated this possibility." The external counsel finally broke his professional silence. "We need to immediately notify our insurance carriers and start preparing comprehensive contingency statements for potential media exposure." Margaret turned toward Connor, who looked genuinely sick. "You're stepping back from all responsibilities. Today, quietly." Connor nodded without resistance, no fight remaining in him. Meanwhile, back at our house, Rachel hadn't moved from our bedroom window in over 20 minutes. She was staring out at our empty backyard like the vacant lawn might suddenly deliver answers to questions she was terrified to ask directly. Her smartphone was literally shaking in her trembling hand. She'd attempted calling Connor 6 times that morning. The first 4 attempts went to voicemail. The 5th time, she didn't even get that courtesy. Just an immediate disconnection. Like he'd powered his phone completely off or blocked her number entirely. On her 7th attempt, she started whispering desperately into the silence. "Connor, please pick up your phone. I think Marcus did something terrible. He's being too calm about everything. He hasn't yelled at me or demanded explanations. He just observes me with this expression I can't read." She hung up and opened her laptop, logging into the private Slack workspace she'd been using to coordinate with Connor. The channel was completely gone, not archived for later reference, entirely deleted from the system. She checked her calendar for their next scheduled quarterly planning retreat, which was the lie she'd been feeding to HR to cover their romantic getaways. The event had vanished, not canceled or rescheduled, completely erased. Her email notification chimed with one new message. The subject line made her stomach drop. "Legal notice. Potential internal review process. Immediate action required." She opened it with trembling fingers and read the first paragraph twice before the words sank in. "We have received preliminary documentation indicating possible breach of fiduciary transparency requirements via romantic entanglements with personnel connected to the Meridian acquisition process. Please be advised that your presence may be required for clarification interviews with our compliance department within 48 hours." Her name was now formally connected to the investigation, not protected by Connor's executive status, not hidden by professional proximity, not deflected by his charm and political connections. She was completely exposed. She fumbled for her phone again and called Harold Brennan, our longtime family friend and highly respected investment lawyer. Harold had been at our wedding ceremony, had given an emotional toast with genuine tears in his eyes, had bounced her on his knee when she was 5 years old. If anyone would help her navigate this nightmare, it would be Harold. "Harold, thank God you answered," she breathed into the phone, already emotionally unraveling. I need your help desperately. The situation is absolutely catastrophic. The firm is in complete freefall. Connor's been frozen out of everything. I'm being pulled into ethics reviews, and Marcus won't even speak to me. Everything's happening so incredibly fast, and I just need to know what's legally salvageable. Harold's voice cut her off like a sharp blade. You're calling now. The silence that followed wasn't confusion or surprise. It was cold, calculated judgment. I know exactly why you're calling, Harold continued with disturbing calm. You want to know what can still be saved. Legally, financially, socially, what little leverage you might still possess in the smoking wreckage you created. Rachel blinked, stunned by his harsh tone. Harold, this isn't fair. You don't understand the complete situation. Oh, I understand it perfectly, he replied with flat emotion. Marcus briefed me 3 weeks ago about potential complications arising from your behavior patterns. Everything inside Rachel's chest collapsed inward like a controlled demolition. I advised him on proper disclosure windows, Harold continued without any emotion. I told him exactly when to escalate through official channels, how to maintain appropriate legal distance, and which reporting paths would leave the cleanest professional footprint. Her voice cracked. You helped him destroy me? A pause. Then came the line that would burn her from the inside out. Because he told me you would eventually test the boundaries of your marriage. I advised him to wait patiently until you did exactly that. The line went dead. Rachel stood in our living room, phone still pressed against her ear, her face completely drained of color. She tried calling Harold back immediately. No answer. She sent a desperate text message. Please, we need to talk. I'm scared. Nothing. She was entirely alone. Connor had vanished into legal protection mode. I had transformed into an untouchable ghost. Her professional network was backing away one contact at a time. And now, Harold had revealed he'd been standing in my corner the entire time. For the first time since Saturday night, Rachel began understanding something that hadn't occurred to her when she'd laughed in my face. She hadn't betrayed a weak, submissive man. She'd systematically betrayed a silent strategist who had simply given her enough rope to test our marriage vows. The aftermath was swift and complete. Within 2 weeks, the $4.2 billion Meridian merger was officially dead, making national business news as a cautionary tale about executive oversight failures. Connor moved back to his hometown after his industry contacts evaporated overnight. Rachel was terminated and blacklisted from the industry. Saturday morning, I received an invitation to speak at the Corporate Ethics Summit about silent integrity in high-stakes environments. Rachel watched the live stream from her studio apartment as I received a standing ovation from executives and legal minds, discussing how I'd been married to someone who mistook silence for weakness. The quiet ones aren't always weak. Sometimes we're waiting for you to give us sufficient reason to speak up. And when we do, the world listens. A